I had just arrived back in London with my family from a trip to India. It was the spring of 1894, as I recall, and the first job at hand was to find quarters for ourselves and our servant, a nice, agreeable chap named Alfred. After several days of touring the busy streets of London, I finally found a house that was unoccupied. Taking down the address of the owner, I went around to see him. He was delighted to see me, much too delighted, in fact. He said he would let me use the house rent-free for an entire year if I could move in immediately. Poor fellow had the idea the place was haunted. For my part, I was delighted and made plans to stay there that very night. I was pleased to find that Alfred was willing to join me in the little adventure. I sent him on ahead and ran around to our hotel to notify my wife of our good fortune and tell her I was spending the night in our new house. I reached the house, knocked, and my servant Alfred opened the door. He lit a candle, and we went to the rooms we were to occupy for the night. My bedroom was the largest. The four-poster bed was opposite the fireplace, and Alfred soon had a fire burning bright and clear. A door communicated with the small room that Alfred was to occupy, which had no other exit but that door leading to my bedroom. In the bureau, which rested near the bed, I found an old silk kerchief, a few odds and ends of female dress, and two faded letters tied round with a narrow ribbon of pale yellow. While I read them, Alfred opened a small box and removed a revolver and a dagger which I had ordered him to bring. One could never tell. Each letter consisted of one line. The first stated, "What's done can't be undone." And the second, "There's nothing against you unless the dead could come to life." In a shaky female hand had been written, "They can." It was then that I noticed on the outside envelope the words, "Lost at sea." I laid the letters on a table in the center of the room, stirred up the crackling fire, picked up a volume of Dickens, and read quietly enough until about 11:30. I told Alfred he might retire to his room. A few moments before midnight, I felt a sudden draft of cold air pass by my cheek. I fancied the door to my right had got open, but no, it was closed. I then looked to the left and saw the flame of the candles flicker violently. I sprang up and seized the revolver and the dagger. Then I heard 3 slow, loud, distinct knocks at the head of my bed. Suddenly, Alfred ran from his room. If ever I saw horror in the human face, it was then. He gasped in a hollow whisper that scarcely seemed to come from his lips. "Run, run, it is after me." He ran to the landing and down the stairs, taking several at a time. In a moment, I heard the street door open and slam shut. I was alone in the haunted house. Then I saw it. How shall I tell you what it was like? It was a darkness, shaping itself forth from the air in very undefined outline. I cannot say it was of human form, and yet it had more resemblance to a human form than anything else. As it stood, its dimensions seemed gigantic, the summit nearly reaching the ceiling. As I stared, I thought that I distinguished 2 eyes looking down on me from the boiling air. I tried to speak, but could not. I could only think to myself, is this fear? Is this fear? I tried to move, but could not. I felt as if I were weighted down by an irresistible force. Opposed to my will was another, far superior. My fear now became horror, horror that no words can convey. Still, I retained pride. And if not pride, then courage. For in my mind I said, this is horror, but it is not fear. Unless I fear, I cannot be harmed. With a great deal of effort, I reached my hand out toward the dagger on the table. But as I did, I felt a strange shock on my arm and shoulder, and I was powerless. And now the light slowly began to wane from the candles. The same was happening with the fire. In a moment, the room was in utter darkness, and my terror reached a climax. And wonder of wonders, I broke forth with the words, "I do not fear, my soul does not fear." With that, I found the strength to leap from the bed and rush to the window and throw back the curtains and fling open the shutters, for my first thought was, light! As the bright moonlight flooded into the room, I felt a joy that almost compensated for the previous terror. Then came the same measured knocks I had heard before. The entire room began to vibrate. A chair advanced itself from the far wall to the table, and in it there now grew a shape. It was that of a young woman with long blonde hair which she was combing. And as she combed, she looked at the door to the landing as if waiting. The shadow on the far wall seemed to grow darker and darker. It also seemed to be waiting. Now from that door appeared another shape, that of a young man in the dress of a century ago. He moved toward the young woman, and as he did, the great shadow struck, boiling down over the two. There was a soft chuckling sound. Then the great shadow whirled away as if in triumph, and there on the floor it left the wispy figures of the young man and woman. As it had been withdrawn, the flame grew in the candles and the fire in the grate. The whole room came once more calmly into sight. The next day, I explained the night's proceedings to the owner, and together we went over the house with a fine tooth comb. In the basement, we found buried back under the bedroom wing a battered sea chest with a crest on it bearing the letters G.H., and in it a sheaf of papers which explained the ritual of the night before. G.H. were the initials of Gideon Hawke, an English pirate who had been in love with the young girl who lived in this home 100 years ago. She refused his attentions and married a proper gentleman of aristocratic birth. In a rage of vengeance, Hawke vowed their death. But before he could arrive in England on his terrible mission, his boat was caught in a storm, and nothing survived but the wreckage in which was found the trunk. A short time later, the young lady and her husband died under very mysterious circumstances. With the removal of the trunk, the nightly reenactment of Gideon Hawke's revenge ceased. And I must say that the house has become a fine, cozy home for myself and my family. As a matter of fact, we still live there.
Thank you for tuning in. This is Exe Files on Phonic FM 106.8. You've just been listening to The Haunted and the Haunters, The Pirate's Curse, from the album Ghost Stories for Young People. I think it was introduced by Alfred Hitchcock, at least. It is a very excellent CD. Alfred is called Alfred Hitchcock, Ghost Stories and Music to be Murdered By, 2 CDs, and that was the CD Ghost Stories and The Haunted and the Haunters. So that will be our story for this evening. Welcome to the show. I'm Alison, Rockbrand, your host, and this is my co-host, Richard Freeman.
Hello, wireless listeners.
We've got a very special guest on the show tonight, Geraldine Beskin from Atlantis Bookshop in London, the original occult bookshop, the oldest, I believe, occult bookshop, and a very interesting place. And she'll be on in a couple of minutes with some stories and tales and stories about books and book lovers and occultists, and so that will be very interesting. Before then, of course, we have a little bit of paranormal news. So, Richard, give us the weird news for today, for this week.
Well, this week's weird news has a very Russian theme. All of the stories are from Russia. So, Russia has created a laboratory in Siberia devoted to the study of extinct animal DNA with the hope of creating clones. The lab in Yakutsk is often called the world's coldest city, will seek out living cells with a view to cloning, says Siman Grigoryev, director of the Mammoth Museum at the city's Northeastern Federal University. He tells Ogonik magazine that the priority is to look into bringing back the mammoth, and adding that Beijing Institute of Genomics and South Korea's Seum Biotech company, which has pioneered dog cloning, will be involved in the study. Earlier this year, researchers at Harvard University announced that they had copied 14 woolly mammoth genes into the genome of an Asian elephant. Scientists at Yatusk's new facility hope that their own unrivaled collection of 2,000 or so remnants of prehistoric animals, ranging from primitive dogs and horses to mammoths, will help identify quality cell tissue from which useful DNA may be extracted. Oh, I'm having a few computer problems. Hang on. No, it doesn't want to know. Oh, here we go. Sorry about that. Here we are. A schoolboy on a camping trip to Siberia found a massive footprint which could be that of the Yeti the Russian media has claimed. Denis Alexandriov, 12, noticed the alleged sign of the Yeti on an early morning walk with other children close to the tent in the mountainous Skorsky National Park in the Komarovo region. The print is twice the size of a man's foot, said his father, Andrei, 49. I'm into hunting, so I understand a bit about footprints, says Andrei, who claimed he did not believe in the Yeti before he witnessed the giant mark in the clay. We went to the place where we saw where the kids saw the footprint. And the only thing I can say is now I know that it exists. The creature must have been very tall, he told the Siberian Times. The edges of the footprint were sharp, meaning that the creature left the footprint not too long ago. The footprint resembles a human's, it was claimed. It had been raining in the night, and the campers who were on a boat trip to the remote Marasu River did not hear any strange noises. Despite their claims, none of the campers are thought to have actually seen the beast itself, which is the second Yeti claim in the region this summer. Artist and sculptor Andrei Lubovchenko drew a picture of a Yeti that he claimed to have seen whilst walking on an early morning of the 27th of July. He said, "It happened so unexpectedly and fast I had no time to get scared. There was a clear feeling that this was a thinking creature. I felt it was trying to talk to me." The Yeti was about 2.5 metres tall, with dark brown hair like a bear's, but a lot softer. He was holding a wooden stick with bits of hair wrapped around it, but the main thing was his eyes. They were light-coloured and just like human eyes. The Kemerovo region is famed for its sightings of the Yeti, though some have proven to be hoaxes. Yeti hunter Igor Borsev, head of the Russian International Centre for Hominology based in the Kemerovo region, estimated there may be as many as 30 Yetis in this part of Russia. Another claim suggested 200 of the fabled creatures in southern Siberia. I should just point out here that in Russia this creature is called the Chuchunya or Almasty, and it's actually quite different from the true Tibetan and Himalayan Yeti, which is a much bigger, much more ape-like animal. Still in Russia, a wooden statue pulled from a peat bog in Russia more than 100 years ago is now believed to be twice as old as Stonehenge. The Shigayar idol, found in the Ural Mountains in 1890, is thought to be 11,000 years old, making it the oldest wooden sculpture in the world. Depicting a... Hang on, a little bit of technical problems here. Depicting a man with mysterious symbols inscribed on him, the scientists believe that it could be an ancient encrypted code. The statue is 1,500 years older than previously thought. Scientists in Germany use the most up-to-date carbon dating technology called accelerated mass spectrometry to determine the statue's age. Thomas Tergberger, a professor at the Department of Cultural Heritage in Lower Saxony, part of the team who dated the idol, told the Siberian Times the results exceeded our expectations. This is an extremely important date for the international scientific community. It's important for understanding the development of civilization and art in Eurasia and humanity as a whole. We can say in those times, 11,000 years ago, hunters and fishermen and gatherers in the Urals were no less developed than the farmers in the Middle East. A source at the Savodovics History Museum in Yekaterinburg, Russia, where the statue is currently under display, told the Siberian Times the first attempt to date the idol was made 107 years after its discovery in 1997. The first radiocarbon analysis showed that the idol was 9,500 calendar years old, which led to disputes in the scientific society. To exclude doubts and to make the results known and accepted, a decision was made to use the most modern technologies to date the idol again. Scientists believe that the complex runes cut into the wood are encoded information about the origins of the universe from the ancient sculptor.
That's fascinating. Thank you very much, Richard. Some excellent stories from Russia, and I think you've done quite well with some of those pronunciations. So
yes, I'll probably pronounce them all wrong, and also my laptop is playing silly buggers tonight as well.
Well, I mean, it sounded pretty good to me. So sorry to any Russian listeners out there if we have pronounced those names wrong, but. Richard did try very hard, and I think it sounded good anyway. Okay, I did want to add one more thing before we go into Geraldine. Last week on the show, we were talking to special guest Emma Dark, actress, horror film producer, director, writer, and we mentioned a theater company, and we didn't quite get the name right, so I wanted to make sure that listeners were able to look them up. They are called Don't Go Into the Cellar Theater Company. And they produce various types of horror theater, storytelling theater, and I think we were originally talking about them because they produced some productions, some plays in cemeteries. So go and check them out. Don't go into the Cellar Theater Company. They have a website and they have a Facebook page. Okay, let's go on to talk to Geraldine. I've pressed the big button. Geraldine, can you hear me? Hello, Geraldine? Okay, just a second. I'll see if I can locate her. What I'll do is I'll just play one of her songs first, and then I'll get her back on the line. This is Dave Davies and the Kinks, "Death of a Clown."
Sorrows in whiskey and gin. The lion tamer's whip doesn't crack anymore. The lions, they won't bite, and the tigers won't roar.
on 106.8. This is advert-free Phonic FM.
Welcome back. This is Alison Rockbrand, and I'm here with my co-host, Richard Freeman. You're listening to Exe Files on Phonic FM 106.8. And we've got Geraldine on. Geraldine, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Hello, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming on. It's wonderful to have you.
I'm pleased to be here. I really am. I've been working away in my study, and this is a very welcome break from it all.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. So tell us, what are you working on?
I'm a little bit late with contributing a chapter to a book, a reissue, and partly rewriting of a book on legendary London. And I've just been away for a month in Australia, so the editors don't need to know, or the publishers don't need to know that really, but they just know that I'm late handing my bit in, so but that's a very good reason why. So I'm trying to play catch up.
Yeah, no, I think when it comes to someone that they definitely want to include, they'll wait a little bit if you're slightly beyond the deadline.
Yeah, I'm just twitchy about it. I don't like trying people's patience, really.
Yeah, but it sounds good. You're definitely like a person to know a lot about legendary London, I think.
Yeah, I'm a Londoner, born and bred, and I was brought up proper in the city, and it is just endlessly fascinating. And partly why I'm late with it is because I keep getting diverted. Normally I'm terribly good, but I've read so much about the highways and byways of London over the last few days, where I've partly written it before I went, and then I'm catching up again. And it's hard to know what to leave out and what to put in and how to make it a coherent whole, really. But I'll get it done. It'll be fine.
That's really interesting. Are you writing specifically about London streets?
Yeah, about areas, really, and the different themes that have gone on, and how certain things occur in certain areas, and the beating of the bounds is enjoying quite a popular revival at the moment because all the parishes have boundaries, and it's a very interesting tradition where small boys are picked up and their heads are donked against and dunked against the stones so they know where the boundaries are. But they also need to use little kids because often the boundary buildings, they've changed and they're in inaccessible places quite often. There's even one boundary marker which is in, I think it's the knicker department of Marks and Spencer's in Oxford, which is on YouTube. It's a very funny couple of minutes watching that. And all these sorts of things. One thing leads to another, to another, to another. It's great fun.
So when is that going to be out then?
Middle of next year, I think.
Cool. Well, we'll definitely look forward to reading that. It sounds really good. It sounds amazing.
Yeah, it should be good fun anyway.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about the legend, local history, local lore and legends of Atlantis Bookshop?
Well, we're in our 93rd year of the business, which is quite surprising for any little business in the West End, really.
Did you say 95th year?
93rd.
93rd.
93rd, not 95th. I may have said 95th. I meant
93rd?
93rd.
So it's a very thelemic year.
Indeed.
Incredible.
And we celebrate Crowleymas every year, we celebrate Crowley's death day. So December the 1st last year, we always give people a present. And last year we gave them tea, because as booksellers we run on tea. So we called it Crowleyana tea. And of course, brew what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And that was the first thing leading us into our 93rd year. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So you're definitely the oldest occult shop in London.
We're the oldest independent. We've never had backers. Watkins is older than us, and they came out of the esoteric section of the Theosophical Society and so on, and they were owned by Wiser Books and things like that over the years. And their slant for many years was Eastern and mystical rather than Western and magical, which ours has always been. And so, I've often said there's a groove in the pavement between Watkins and ourselves that we share customers very happily. And, they've just worn the pavements down over the years. So it's quite nice.
I think it's still a little bit the same. I think Watkins does sell slightly more mystical as opposed to magical books.
Yeah. We've all got, we're like pubs or sweet shops or cafes or anything like that. We've all got our different flavours. And so people in London are very, very well served for their esoteric stuff.
Yeah, it just all it takes is a little trip down to the West End, take in a show, get some occult books.
Yeah, but we have a history that you couldn't buy.
Yeah.
People like Yeats, Steele Fortune, Austin Spare, Crowley. They all were friends of the man who started it, who was in turn a friend of my dad's, and so it went on. It's where Gerald Gardner started modern day witchcraft. It's it's got a hell of a history, that little shop. We're very, very proud of it.
Yeah, well, it's a wonderful little shop, as I'm sure anyone knows who's ever visited there. Very homey, very welcoming.
Yeah, it's hard. Well, we try hard. We're organised in a disorganised kind of a way, and it sort of works, really.
So what is how did you start getting involved then in...
Well, my father knew the man who started it. They were great friends, and then when Michael died, my father then bought it. And we had it, and then we sold it. And I always say that the 90s were my gap years. I went to live in the country, and I had a marvellous life there, and then I came back to London, and the person who's got it had just run it into the ground, and it was in a very, very sorry state. And so my daughter and I bought it back in a heartbeat, as they say. And it just, our gamble was that we were buying a very long-established business with a very, very bad reputation by then. And fortunately, it just went boing. We understood that we are guardians of it. And it just responded to my family being back, really. And it's been marvellous ever since.
Wow, it's a great story.
Yeah, these things are important, and I don't know why it moved around a couple of times as a business before it settled where it is, but it's been there since about 1946, and it just seems to be the right place for it, really.
Wow, and it's just so wonderful to have a connection to these older shops and older tradition of shopkeeping. Considering especially in London, there's so much new stuff, new shops. Constant change, constant movement.
Well, when we bought it back, we could have gone down the glass and stainless steel route and been terribly shishi and terribly sort of smart about things. But actually, I designed it to look like a bookshop, which is what it actually is. And that works very well. People respond to that. It can function, having defined its space like that. And we get loads of. We must be photographed over 2,000 times a year by people who just wander in and think, "Oh, this is a nice space." And occasionally people bring their children in and say, "See, this is what a bookshop should look like."
Oh, that's wonderful.
Nice.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it is that kind of space. It is definitely a very homey, old-fashioned bookshoppy space, but still, you've got that big window, and so that it's very light, and I think it's got a sort of a grounded energy, but still a very light energy as well, and a sort of an active energy. So it's not like a stodgy type of atmosphere either. No,
and everybody is welcome. We are not elitist in any way. As Crowley said, every man and woman is a star. And so everybody is welcome, and we do not care whether they're witches or they're, magicians or alchemists or astrologers or whatever they are. They come in as people, and it goes from there. We're not cliquey. We don't have a bias, and other than we're Western and magical, and that's as far as it goes. And then it's up to people to like us and like what we offer them.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, absolutely. What about some of the notable guests that have wandered in or that have been associated to the shop?
Well, we try and make it so that we only talk about our dead customers rather than our live if they're famous, because they do deserve their privacy.
Yeah, that's true.
But the authors come in, while they're researching as well as while they're when they've got something to sell. In fact, then on the 18th, I think it is, if that's the Friday, we're launching Mark Ryan's autobiography. He did the Wildwood Tarot and things like that, but he was the Saracen in Robin of Sherwood with Jason Connery, and he's one of the voices of one of the Transformers, and he's in Black Sails and things. And Mark's a wonderful fellow, and we're very, very pleased to have his launch coming up.
That's the 18th of September?
Yeah, I mean, but, it's that sort of thing. You would think that you have a Hollywood actor, fight arranger, stunt organizer and so on, and, somebody who's very cool in Comic-Con circles as well, launching his autobiography with us. But it should be a good evening.
So what about the dead guests then? Can you...
Well, Crowley's obviously our most notorious one.
Yeah.
He was one of those people. I think that I would have loved to have gone up the pub with him, but I would have also been terribly, terribly, terribly embarrassed that I was in his company at the same time. I think he was just he had that petulance about him, and he had that crackling wit, and he had everything. That it would be a memorable evening, come what may, with him.
I think he would be an intimidating character, most definitely.
Yes. And, but also great fun. There's a story that he was in a pub in Fitzrovia, and Dylan Thomas was there when he'd barely been discovered, and he was doodling on a beer mat, and Crowley then sort of called him over, and Crowley had doodled the same thing, which freaked Dylan Thomas out completely, and he had to be helped home by his woman companion. And some years ago, a dear old customer came in from Ireland, and he said that he could vouch for that story being true.
Wow.
That he had dinner parties with this woman quite regularly. So those sorts of things are very pleasing to me, those tiny details. But, they're not just apocryphal stories. There is a truth to them. That's rather nice.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have a place like Atlantis where you can preserve these kind of oral histories or smaller details of people's lives like that.
Yeah, it's all the bits that never get written down, really.
Yeah.
That, and a lot of the younger people nowadays don't understand that we just got on with our lives. We didn't record everything. We didn't have an ear and an eye for posterity. We just lived it. And so did they, really. And it's the baby boomer generation who have been the worst at recording who they saw and when they saw it. So many of the biographies are going to have to say anecdotally, it's believed that, because we were the people who stopped writing letters. Our generation didn't bother. We rang each other. So there's going to be a big hole in the biographies when they try and write them for our current generation.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's great that, like you're saying, this person walked into the shop and started talking about their experiences and, vouching for, various biographical data. I think that's wonderful that there can be like a bookshop is not just a place to buy books, but a place to talk about books and talk about other surrounding contexts of the books themselves, and a place for conversation and exchange.
It's an essential part of it, absolutely essential part of it. I had somebody in the other day who was talking about a cache of Golden Dawn letters and things that have just resurfaced. And they're going to rewrite history. Absolutely fabulous. Really very, very exciting. But it all takes time.
Yeah, well, this leads into maybe a final question before we go into some of your musical choices. And so, yeah, I mean, you've talked about Crowley a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit more about your other research projects or more about your research on Crowley?
Well, I was over in California this year talking at a conference again, and because they're marvellous over there. If you come from London, they think you live in Downton Abbey, or at least know the people. They're wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. But from it, I then got a book deal. I've been approached to write up one of my talks which is about, the talk was about Crowley, Frieda Harris and the soft cards and their development using some of the letters that I own. And from that, I've now got to write it up into a book, which has thrilled me beyond belief. I'm really very, very excited by that.
That's really fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, you've been doing these talks and you've been doing this research for years. So
Yeah. I mean, partly why I'm late with the book I mentioned at the beginning is because I've just come back from Australia, where I was talking at the Tarot Guild, their conference in Melbourne, and they flew me out there and so on. And then that was one of the talks that I did for them. And then I actually had a holiday, which is a great thing to have, especially wandering around Australia. It was absolutely brilliant. But I've always got something on the go. I'm coming down to Glastonbury to the Dion Fortune conference again in 26th September, because I'm doing work on her as a theosophist as my sort of breakout from my obsessive work on my major book, my main book. So it never stops, but I don't want it to either.
No, of course not.
My life is the research is the fun part. The talks are enjoyable, and and so it goes on, really.
Well, I think that's fantastic. Congratulations. I think like the entire, occult scene is going to be excited to be able to get this book, because I think everyone knows about your research and your talks, and so this is going to sort of be a compilation of a lot of your research. I think that's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, well, I've got my next 2 books. People are sniffing around them already. So
fantastic.
Yeah. So, we shall see what we shall see. I've got to get the first one done first.
I think it's long overdue.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of your musical choices, and then we'll play the songs. We played already the Kinks, Death of a Clown. Do you want to...
Dave Davis is a lovely man. I've known him for many, many years. We're sort of mates, and he is a fabulously spiritual man, and I think that's informed his songwriting quite often. And, things like Death of a Clown, it just makes you think every now and again, I ought to just grow up and stop doing it like that, to leave that clownish, stupid side of yourself behind on whatever it happens to be that you do, bite your nails or whatever. And so, celebrate it and move on from it was the reason for that, really.
And the next 2 we're going to play now are John Lennon's Imagine.
Yeah, that's about opening your mind. Just the possibilities of what if, really.
Yeah, it's definitely a classic. It's one of my favorite songs as well. And then you've chosen Blur. Yeah,
they just fitted into a very happy phase in my life, really. And there was a clarity to them, and I just enjoy the music.
Well, excellent. Okay, so we're going to play those 2 songs, and then we'll come back with some questions from Richard.
Okay.
So talk to you in a couple of minutes, Geraldine.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Write with passion. Phonic FM, 106.8 FM.
Hello, welcome back to Exe Files on Phonic FM, 106.8 FM in Exeter, or online if you're listening online. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'm Alison Rockbrand, and I'm here with Richard Freeman. Hello, Richard.
Hello.
We are talking with Geraldine Beskin from Atlantis Bookshop. Hello, Geraldine.
Hello there.
Hello. Sorry, there was a little bit of a technical issue when I played John Lennon just now, so sorry everyone for some slight weirdness. We do tech the show ourselves, so from time to time, weird things do happen.
It should also be noted that I am a committed technophobe and utter Luddite.
So Richard refuses to come near the tech booth where I am. And we should also mention that last week some very strange phenomena happened in the studio with our clock. As we finished the show, the clock started going absolutely mad, and the hands spinning around really, really quickly, and then it stopped at exactly midnight. So it was really weird. Okay, so Richard, I think you have some interesting questions for Geraldine about bookkeeping.
Yes. As a rabid bibliophile myself, I was wondering what is the rarest or most unusual book you've ever had in the shop?
I don't know, but I know the biggest and the heaviest we ever had, which was the first edition of Manly P. Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages. And he actually wrote a shelf full of books, but that's the one that people know that title as being by him. But the first edition was done when he was 29, and he was finished in writing it as the first chapters were going through the presses. This book weighs 32 pounds. It's nearly 2 feet long, and it's about 4-5 inches thick. It's enormous, basically, and it's got very, very splendid coloured colour images throughout and so on. And it made his name. It was just one of those books, but it just seems to weigh a blooming ton. And then, oddly enough, I bought it. I sold it within half an hour to somebody who just happened to see it, and then that person then bought it back in to resell, and again I sold it within half an hour. So it's a curious book altogether, that, but it is vast.
It is a fascinating book. It's one of my favorite books, actually. It's one of the books I read when I was a teenager. My parents bought me some copy of it. Mm-hmm. They knew I was into the occult, and it's just such a strange book. But the edition I had also had these incredible color plate photos and images, and just a very unusual book. Yes, no, but a fantastic mind to have been able to do that. And Randolph Hearst, the multi-millionaire and so on, had a copy, said that the only fault in it was that Madame Blavatsky was called Helen Blavatsky, not Helena Blavatsky, throughout, which was not bad going, really. They were the only faults he could find. So other than that, it would have been perfect.
So do you collect yourself privately? Or?
Yeah, well, I'm a hoarder rather than a collector. When I was a kid, I used to buy Crowley and various bits and pieces like that, and because my dad was interned to some extent, and then the people who were running the shop for us would sort of come and take them, and so I've never been a collector to that extent. I'm a hoarder, and I haven't got a complete set of the Equinox. I've got odd volumes that I've come across over the years and things like that. But I've got a good collection. I can't lay it down, really. But it also comes with age to some extent. Things that weren't fashionable become fashionable. Things that were readily available to a generation become scarcer for the next one that comes along, and so on. And also, what I've bought, I've paid the money for at the time. It's like you buy a house. It's as much as you can afford, and it's not your fault that the market goes up or down then. And it's very much the same with books. But equally, I've read them. I haven't just kept them wrapped up for pension, being an eventual pension or something like that. I've had the fun of my books.
I know, as a bibliophile myself, if I ever ran a bookshop, I'd be wanting to keep a lot of it for myself rather than selling it. I'd be dreadful as a businessman.
Well, my daughter's my partner in the business, and she says, when I get a collection in, it's a case of, one for me, one for the shop, one for me, one for the shop. But I'm not as bad as that, really, but there's that strong temptation always. And I've had to sort of restrict and limit it slightly. Years ago I had moved from a very big house to a smaller one, and so I got rid of fiction and various things like that had helped shape me, but I knew I wasn't going to go back to, and I also knew I could buy another copy if I ever wanted it. And so my collection is fairly much occult nowadays.
You were saying earlier you've been working on this book on legendary London.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering what is your opinion on Spring-Heeled Jack?
Well, I like these sorts of things. I think that there are oddities that places should have, and it's a great way of getting the kids to come in and stop playing in the street when the days when kids did do that. It's good to have a sort of a bogeyman around that's going to get you if you don't behave. And I think that there are, I think it's a good urban legend, really. What's your take on him?
Well, there was a theory that it was the Marquis of Waterford, who was an eccentric Irish nobleman who loved playing dangerous stunts and pranks on people. But the sightings carried on after he died. He got into an altercation with a watchman somewhere who cracked him over the head with a cudgel and killed him. But it was almost as if the character had become an archetype, because it spread out from London. He was first reported in the 1830s, and he spread out from London, and then the reports started to come from places as far afield as Sheffield and Liverpool, well over a century. And there were sightings in Liverpool, for instance, well into the 20th century. And from Sheffield, I remember seeing an interview with a policeman who had gone after Spring-Heeled Jack after a spate of sightings in 1977. And this chief of police and a bunch of other coppers had got this bounding, cloaked figure cornered in an old factory, and he'd entered a room, and they knew there was no way out of this room, and then they burst into the room, nothing there.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Where was this? Was it in London?
That was in Sheffield.
That was in Sheffield?
Yeah.
Oh.
And there were sightings in the 70s as well in Liverpool, and similar figures were even reported in the Americas, as if the phenomenon, whatever it was, had travelled with people.
Because I was thinking in Sheffield and in Liverpool you had a lot of urban regeneration going on that kind of didn't quite happen. They just flattened a lot of the warehouses and places like that and left desolate spaces. And it could have reactivated something that had just been quite cosily holed up somewhere for a long, long time, couldn't it?
Well, it's interesting to think that the original Spring-Heeled Jack may or may not have been a man in a costume terrifying people, but it became so much more than that.
Yeah. And there's also, the idea that policemen do not lie.
Oh, they certainly do.
No, but it is curious when it's a shared...
Yeah, there's a bunch of them,
like that.
And this guy seemed genuinely baffled and alarmed by what had happened.
I think we all would be, really, but isn't it exciting? Isn't it great that nowadays it still happens?
Yes,
That's one of the rewarding things about being interested in all this stuff. You're a never-ending raft of things to be amazed by.
It certainly does, and you've got to think about this guy being a high-ranking copper. He was risking an awful lot by coming back and saying, look, I've chased this figure in a cloak, jumping impossible heights and distances into a closed room, and there was nothing in there.
Yeah.
He looked like a complete lunatic.
It's also a difficult thing for, ordinary people to replicate, really. It would have to be some sort of stray pole vaulter or something like that to be able to do what he does.
Well, there were some tests.
It just doesn't happen.
There were some tests done on the effects it would have on you, trying to wear these boots with springs in them. And actually, Nazi paratroopers in World War II actually had spring-heeled boots to jump when they landed, and they found they all broke their broke their ankles. I mean, they have perfected something now, these great long, almost stilt-like things that you can bound around on like a kangaroo.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Yes, but that was fairly recently.
Yes, and very public. That's the other thing. There was nothing covert about it. It was, and they just wasn't there then. And I mean, even if one of the kids, even if it was like these kids that jump from building to building to building nowadays, being able to read a building and knowing where to land and so on, the buildings weren't like that in a funny sort of way back then. It's an odd thing to do, and the cloak would have been a terrible impediment to success, I would have.
And another interesting aspect is the way it was taken up by the penny dreadfuls and the magazines at the time and the newspapers, so that this sort of fiendish figure almost became a sort of a folk anti-hero, almost like the first supervillain.
Yeah, but it's quite irresistible though, isn't it? Someone dark like that. It's not like he jumped around and left golden guineas on people's doorsteps or anything. Again, he was the bogeyman, really. If you don't know it, you're frightened of it, and therefore it's bad. So I've seen some animals in Australia, which, as a cryptozoologist, I think would have interested you up, sort of 200 years ago. They're just so strangely shaped.
Well, I always thought that God was drunk when he made Australia. You think the stuff that's there now is odd. In prehistoric times, they had a 30-foot lizard with a venomous bite, a 30-foot crocodile that lived on land and galloped like a horse, a 10-foot tall flesh-eating duck, a 10-foot tall kangaroo, meat-eating kangaroos, marsupial rhinos, the whole lot. I was down in Tasmania just a couple of years ago looking for the Tasmanian wolf, which is a flesh-eating marsupial, supposedly extinct, but people keep seeing it, including park rangers and wardens and zoologists. So it's probably still out there in the wilds of Tasmania.
Well, it's a hardy little critter, I tell you. I've just come back from Tasmania and I froze.
It's miserable over there, isn't it?
Oh, it's bitter.
It makes Britain look like the Bahamas.
This is not the time of year to go if you want to get a suntan, that's for sure.
No, apparently January, February, March is the months to go. I was over there in January, but it was still very inclement. It was throwing it down.
Yeah, I was there at the end of February before, and that was very, very pleasant, I must say. But in the last few weeks, it was fairly grim, it must be said. But good fun.
So we're just coming up to the end of the hour. Are there any other events you'd like to tell us about at Atlantis? You've mentioned September the 18th book launch.
Well, oddly enough, we've got an Australian author. It's a very Australian show, this, isn't it? Tonight? Jane Meredith. She's coming to speak with us again this coming Tuesday.
Okay.
About reclaiming paradise. She takes us on a trance journey. Her stuff is very experiential and very safe, I would think. And so that's this week. And so there's Mark Ryan's launch. There's Healing with the Wheel of the Year and the Gifts of Mabon with Tiffany Lazek on the 19th. So there's always something happening, it seems, really. And the other thing I'm involved with is there's a plan afoot to get the Gog Magog figures back on Plymouth Home.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yes. A very dear friend of mine is doing that, Charles Newington. And somebody from the council misspoke a week or so ago and said, no, we're not going to do it, it's going to cost £6 million. They were thinking of something else entirely, but so the Gogs are going ahead. So we're very, very excited by that. So if anybody wants to support that and tell the council they think it's a brilliant idea, then please do so.
Yeah, no, that would be great to have those back again.
Oh, and it's such a wonderful, wonderful story, and it's our oldest piece of folklore. It's so well documented. In fact, even Melbourne has got 2 7-foot-high Gog Magog figures in one of its Victorian arcades.
Wow.
So they're in the air, they're afoot, which is great.
Well, sounds fantastic. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this last song we're going to play? You've got Stereo MC, Deep Down and Dirty.
I just think it's fabulous. I defy anybody not to just get up and dance. It's just a stunning record, I think.
It is a good song. And Richard, do you want to let us know about what's happening next week?
Yes, next week we have the legendary 14 investigator Nick Redfern joining us, all the way from the US of A. He's an old mate of mine. He's actually from Birmingham, but he moved over to America when he married a Texan girl, and he's lived there ever since. So he writes about everything from cryptozoology, the occult, flying saucers, men in black, conspiracy theories, small bells with curious uses, you name it.
So this is next week, September the 11th?
September the 11th.
At the Witching Hour. Thank you very much, Geraldine. You've been fantastic.
Thanks, Geraldine.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you both.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Left alone to weep. Cause this day I found my friend is inside my own mind and soul to keep. And this spirit is letting go and letting the people know that this ain't the time and this ain't the place to test me. This ain't the face to judge, don't stress me. This is the place, this is the time. My enterprise and this my rhyme. Come on, cause I walk, while I talk. You thought, the things you did, the things you said to me, and all the others, the ones before, the ones who came, the ones who left, and now you're feeling sorry, sad and left alone. You best believe the microphone alone. I'm here to stay, make you pay, and understand that there ain't no other day but today. Now I'm living it up, now I'm living it up. There ain't nothing bring me down, so don't even try. I'll size you up, I'll size you down, I'll size you round this crazy upturned town that's burning with love and hate and things you can't understand. There's too small or great. Oh, I can't wait for this time to come. I can't wait for this time to come. I can't wait for this time to come. Living it true to life now. Living it true to life, yeah. Living it true to life now. I must be true to life. I must be true to life. Deep down and dirty, I'm slaving after you. Groveling on them hard coals, deep down and dirty. Slaving to this rhythm here, again deep down and dirty. Ain't nothing going on but this sound, man.